This is where they drag out the English-speaking dinosaur. Thanks for having me. Some know who I am, some don't. When Hendrik and Ivar invited me to speak, I came for an interview or a discussion with them, and I landed in the airport, and I got in a taxi, and this young boy looked in the rearview mirror and smiled, and he was being really friendly, and I thought he was going to say, "Hi, Mr. Oberschneider," and instead he said, "First time to Estonia?" I was slightly disappointed. I said, "Well, actually, no. I was here in '92. And he stops the car. He says, "Wow, that must have been really something." He said, "I was born in '95. I mean, my friend who started one of the largest banks across the Baltic says he goes into the banking hall these days and nobody knows who he is. I find that amazing. Anyway, it's a long time ago. So thank you, Ivar, thank you, Hendrik, for inviting me here. Thank you, Danske Bank, for the opportunity to speak in front of this illustrious crowd of friends and family, basically. A lot of people I remember, a lot of people I recognize. We're going to do this unplugged. I had a deck of slides, but the last thing you want to see is slides. And in the spirit of simplicity, which is, I think, what we're talking about today, I didn't feel that you needed to see a bunch of slides about things. We've already done that. And it's the end of the day, so we're going to go off-piste a little bit, if you don't mind. But I want to rewind. I want to rewind to 2007. How many of you were doing business in 2007? Okay. What was happening in 2007? Everybody was making money. You could call your broker at, Forex Bank in the morning or Hansa Bank at that time and sell in the afternoon, you would have made 20%. Easy. Everybody was a property developer. Everybody was having it was like 1997. Who here remembers 97? Wow, oh, that's impressive. Before the crisis, the Russian currency crisis, the music was so loud, the noise was so loud, you couldn't hear anything. Everybody was doing so well. And I wonder if that's kind of where we are today. 10 years, 10 years, 10 years. But what was I doing? I was at the top of my game. I was trying to buy out a competitor. I was trying to buy out a property company in Helsinki called Citycon with an Israeli group. I had built 2 million square feet of shopping center space. I had 5 hotels from Tallinn to Krakow, and an agency business that I had grown from 1 person to 375 people across 6 countries with 35 offices. Many people probably don't even know that. So, and I was in London trying to raise a Central Eastern European property fund to 100 million. I had a broker, it was Credit Suisse, and I had 2 key cornerstone investors already. And in the middle of all this, noise, competitiveness, racing to the finish line, the phone rings. In 1992, I'm in a sauna with a guy named Elvis and a bunch of city officials. How many of you remember Carl Danhammer? SD Elvis, right? Carl, between vodka and mayonnaise salad, starts to mumble something about how the Finns always invest too late, that they're always the last ones at the party because they want everything perfect. They want all the I's dotted and all the T's crossed. And I forget, who we're in a sauna, who thinks about, I forget about this comment for 15, 16 years. I never think about it again. But Carl gave me a gift. And he didn't know he gave me a gift, but he gave me a gift. And he planted the seed in the back of my head that I kept there for all those years, and I never thought about it again. In 2007, when it was so noisy, when the music was so loud, when I was being so competitive, and that phone rang, who do you think was on the other line of the phone? Take a guess. Thank you. It was a Finnish private equity firm calling me to ask me if they could meet me about buying one of my businesses. So I'd spent hundreds of thousands of pounds in London, or euros in London, on advisory fees. I was in the middle with this Israeli group trying to buy this CityCon in Helsinki, and I was talking to my competitors about maybe buying their shares, and that phone rang, and I put the phone down, and I said to my colleagues, we're done. We're done. And for a year, as the music continued to get louder and louder and louder, and people that wouldn't have even considered Central and Eastern Europe as an investment in 92 and 93 because they thought the markets were too shallow and too small and too opaque and too dangerous and they were all tripping over themselves to get in these markets. And we sold our hotel group, we sold our land, we sold our residential stuff, we sold the Luther project behind the Tallinn Bank, we sold all the 2 million square feet of retail, and we sold Oberhaus the last week before the crisis. They paid me 10.5 times future earnings. A week later, probably it was worthless. So Carl, wherever he is, I thank him every day because he gave me a gift. It wasn't because I was smart. It wasn't because I had lots of economic data that I knew. It wasn't because I was looking at the charts saying we're at the top of the market. It was because some guy told me something that made sense. And it put everything in perspective. And that's simplicity. Because simplicity really is that thing that's below the noise. It lurks below the competitiveness, the finish line that we're all trying to race to that we don't know where it is. It's below the compare and despair, It's that quiet knock on the door that unless we're awake, we miss. Now, I know everybody's been talking about simplicity in organizations and structures, and I'm not smart enough to talk about any of that. I don't know any of that. I never worked for a big company, so I have no idea how that all works. I just know what worked for me. And I just illustrate that as something to think about, because today, the noise is even louder than it was back then. With social media, the internet, the way it's grown, all the productivity tools that we have at our fingertips is overwhelming. I have 100 ideas a day anyway. Throw all that stuff into the mix, and I have 100 times 100 times 100 ideas. I look at my phone, and somebody else is doing something that I want to do. And so I rush off and do that now. Then I do this, and then, So it's gotten crazy, in my opinion, and we just need to stop some of this stuff. I was on a podcast with E.O. Fire. The guy has something like 3 million unique users. And it's for all the millennials, all the technology kids, and he asked me, this guy asked me this question. He says, can you give our listeners a technology tip that you use every day that makes you efficient? And I think about it. And I said, yeah, sure. Are you ready? Yeah. I said, are you sitting down? Yeah. I said, tell them to go buy a notebook and a pen. That's what I use. And I'm the most organized person that I can think of. All this other stuff is just noise to me. So how does a guy that doesn't speak Estonian, doesn't know anybody in Estonia, or in Latvia, or in Lithuania, or in Poland, or in the Ukraine, or in Croatia, how does that guy come in 1993 and start a business? How does that happen? It was probably because I didn't speak the language, I didn't know anybody, and I didn't have all that baggage of noise that allowed me to do those things. You see, one of the problems I had, as Raivo Vare will tell you, is when I was working for the Bank of Tallinn years ago, is I couldn't participate because I couldn't speak the language. So everything had to be done for my sake in English, which was a real pain for a lot of people, And there were some really nice people that helped me along the way. But the point is that when I went out on my own, I had to hire people to do things for me because I couldn't do it by myself. Now, as an entrepreneur, as I am, as you are, many of you, you'll know that probably you're a bit of a control freak. You want to do everything yourself. You can do it better than anybody else. So you do it better than anybody else and you do it. But it doesn't allow you to grow your business because you're trying to do everything. See, me, on the other hand, I didn't have that luxury. I couldn't talk to anybody. I couldn't express myself in a meeting, so I had to hire people that could do that for me. And that simple handicap allowed me to grow my business 10 times faster than any of my competitors because all of them were all trying to do everything by themselves, And I just learned that you don't need to be an expert. There's this 10,000 hour rule that everybody talks about. And maybe that's good in sports, and maybe that's good if you're the Beatles or in music. But in business, you can hire 10,000 hours in 5 minutes. Just pick up the phone. And that's what I learned how to do. To hire people that knew a lot more than I did. People that could support me and help me. And that's how I was able to succeed. Very simply. I was incapable of being complex because I wasn't capable of being complex, if that makes sense. So, for me, simplicity was my handicap. And I had to keep things extremely simple in my life and in my business because I had no other choice, So when I think about complexity, when I try to really kind of listen and really be quiet and think about what's below that noise, because that's where the good stuff is, That's where the message is. And you have to have a little bit of faith to do that. I'll tell you another story. When I was after my little stint with Bank of Tallinn, and I was no longer needed, I actually had no idea what I was going to do. And I was running on the Baltic Sea. It was February. It was very cold. And I got to the end of the road in Pirita, and there was a guy throwing a stick into this icy water, and his mangy black dog was going in getting the stick. And I watched that for 10 minutes, and I had this epiphany. And the epiphany was that rather than just complicate everything, I just decided that I had to find a certain level of faith in where I was and what I was doing. And I had to dig where there were potatoes, which is where my feet were. So I stayed where I was. I stayed where everybody thought I was going to go home. I stayed where I was and said, you know what, I'm here. We'll just keep it really, really easy. And I went into a business that I could understand, which was real estate. Because I couldn't privatize anything, because I couldn't sit in the meeting and negotiate with anybody. But I knew bricks and mortar probably were pretty cheap. And that's how I started. And I started with one PA from the bank and another guy. And we went into an office in Peak 30 and started a little business. And 1 month later, we were 35 people. And that business grew over 10 years to what Oberhaus was at the end. So what I submit to you, if there's a message that I'm imparting, is that there's way too much noise out there. Put down the laptop, put down the iPad, put down the phone, pull out a piece of paper, and think about what business you're really in. Do you need to be in 10 different businesses? Do you need to serve 10 groups of customers? Do you need to complicate your life? We saw a slide earlier of a company that's in, I don't know, God knows how many businesses. How do they manage that? I don't know. I was in one business, and the successful people I know have always been in one business, whether it be banking or insurance or real estate or whatever it is. It's one thing. They stay focused. So what I impart to you is take a deep breath, look beneath the noise, look around, and listen for that knock on the door. Look for those opportunities that are quietly tapping you on the shoulder, because that's where the success is. Thank you very much.